Aria Bennett adjusted the strap of her worn backpack as she settled into the window seat of Flight 412, heading from Chicago to Boston. The hum of the engines was a lullaby of its own, but she preferred something warmer, something human. Quietly, she began to hum a Spanish lullaby her grandmother had taught her, a melody that had soothed both her own restless nights and those of her son, Leo. The small boy, curled up against the soft cushion beside her, stirred slightly, his tiny fingers curling around hers as the notes wrapped around him like a gentle blanket. Around her, the cabin murmured with the low chatter of travelers, the clinking of coffee cups, and the occasional squeak of a cart. Yet her song seemed to create a pocket of stillness, a momentary pause in the moving world. Aria's voice, though soft, carried a careful precision, the subtle accent of someone who had lived inside languages rather than merely studied them. Not far away, in first class, Julian Hartwell, a sharply dressed businessman with a reputation for spotting value where others did not, paused mid-scroll through his tablet. He was reviewing a translation of a Turkish regulatory report for a potential biotech partnership. Something felt off, though he could not immediately place it. Then, faintly but unmistakably, a word rolled off the cabin air in Spanish, a lullaby so perfectly sung it seemed to correct the chaos around it. Julian's eyes darted to the source, intrigued more by the confidence in the tone than the melody itself. He noticed a woman in coach, focused entirely on her son, yet aware of every nuance in the world. Her eyes, a striking shade of amber, flicked briefly to his direction when she noticed the small error in the Turkish phrasing he had been studying. He hadn't spoken aloud, yet her lips formed the corrected phrase under her breath, almost as if testing whether someone was listening. That small gesture of expertise, quiet yet assertive, drew Julian closer in curiosity. Aria noticed him then, a subtle awareness that someone across the aisle was observing not the lullaby, but the attention she paid to words, to meaning, to the precision of communication. She had always been this way, her life structured around languages, though she had left university after Leo's birth to focus entirely on being a mother. Her talent had not diminished. It had evolved, sharpened by necessity, by long nights of reading, translating, and singing songs that bridged continents and cultures. Her fingers traced the edge of her notebook, filled with notes in Hungarian, Korean, and a variety of other scripts she had memorized over the years, a record of a mind that never stopped learning. Julian, sensing a rare presence, made a subtle gesture toward the empty seat beside her, though not an invitation, more an acknowledgement, as if to say he recognized something precious in the way she interacted with words. The hours of flight passed in a delicate rhythm, Aria humming occasionally, Leo napping against her chest, and Julian stealing glances, observing the meticulous care with which she engaged the world. When turbulence rattled the plane, she adjusted, murmuring reassurances to Leo in French this time, her voice flowing seamlessly from Spanish to French, then to Mandarin, each language softening the tension. Julian, impressed not by the languages themselves but by the depth of understanding behind them, realized that she possessed a skill that could not be taught in classrooms or learned from a book. It was intuition, empathy, and precision intertwined. By the time the flight attendants served drinks, he had formulated a plan not bold, not rushed, but deliberate, a quiet strategy to bridge this unexpected encounter with opportunity. Aria, for her part, felt only fleeting awareness of the man's interest. She was used to being overlooked in the high-stakes adult world, her existence often distilled down to single mother in casual conversation. Yet Julian's recognition, silent and observant, sparked something faintly thrilling, the possibility that her skill, honed over years of sacrifice and care, might be seen beyond the context of home and childcare. As the plane began its descent toward Boston, he approached her, a polite yet purposeful stride that commanded attention without imposing it. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm, confident. "I couldn't help but notice your approach to translation. Would you be open to discussing an opportunity where your expertise could make a critical difference?" Aria blinked, adjusting Leo in her lap. I'm not sure what you mean," she said carefully, wary of strangers and sudden offers. But Julian's gaze, steady and unjudging, conveyed something she rarely encountered, understanding without expectation, recognition without patronizing. He explained briefly that his company was preparing for a high-stakes biotech meeting, requiring a precise understanding of regulatory language in multiple European languages, including Hungarian, Turkish, and German. A single mistranslation could cost millions, and he had noticed her accuracy from across the cabin. Her first instinct was to refuse. She had responsibilities, schedules, and a small child whose routines could not be disrupted lightly. But there was also the pull of her own potential, long ignored and quietly aching for expression. She asked him for details, questions flowing naturally as her mind assessed risk, logistics, and the sheer improbability of the scenario. Julian answered with patience, providing enough clarity to ease, but not pressure, leaving the decision firmly in her hands. By the time the plane touched down, Arya felt an unfamiliar surge of anticipation mingled with anxiety. She had no certainty of what awaited her, only the tantalizing sense that this could be a rare chance to step into a space where her abilities mattered in ways beyond personal or familial care. At baggage claim, as Leo tugged gently at her sleeve, she considered the implications. Her life had been measured in routines and quiet sacrifices, but here was an avenue to be seen differently, to be recognized for what she truly could offer. Julian, standing across the carousel, waited without impatience, a small nod indicating the continuation of a conversation that had begun miles above the earth. When she approached, tentative but curious, he handed her a neatly folded card, minimalistic in design, bearing a single message: Boston, tomorrow. Be ready. There was no arrogance, no expectation of immediate compliance, simply the acknowledgement of skill and an invitation. Walking out of the airport, Arya felt the gravity of what had happened. A lullaby sung in the back of a crowded plane had changed the trajectory of her day, perhaps even her life. She glanced at Leo, who had now awakened, blinking at the sunlight streaming through the terminal windows. She squeezed his hand, realizing that whatever decision she made next would ripple through both of their lives. That night, as she prepared for the meeting in Boston, she reviewed translations, polished her notes, and considered each language, each nuance, with a renewed sense of purpose. The lullaby had been the key that unlocked a door she had not dared approach before, and she intended to walk through it fully prepared, with her son's well-being always in mind. Julian, meanwhile, returned to his office with a quiet satisfaction. He did not often encounter talent this precise, this instinctively aligned with the intricate demands of language in high-stakes settings. Most professionals could navigate charts and reports, but few could sense the subtlety of a phrase, the nuance of a word that looked correct on paper but failed in practice. Arya's ability had drawn his attention not through resume or recommendation, but through observation and intuition, two qualities he valued above all in his business dealings. He made notes to prepare for her arrival, arranging meetings, reviewing regulatory documents, and ensuring that when she stepped into Boston the next day, she would have both the resources and the stage to prove her worth. That evening, as Arya tucked Leo into bed, she hummed the lullaby once more, feeling a quiet surge of confidence. The melody seemed to carry with it a promise. That recognition and opportunity could arise in the most unexpected ways. That talent, when combined with courage, could be the spark that changed lives. She allowed herself a small smile, whispering to Leo in Italian as he drifted off, that tomorrow, perhaps, the world would see what she had always known. Her voice, her mind, her meticulous care with language were not just gifts for home, they were powerful, valuable, and deserving of the stage she was about to step onto. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the Boston Conference Center, reflecting off polished surfaces and casting elongated shadows across the marble floors. Arya Bennett, dressed in a tailored navy blazer that she had borrowed from a friend to give her confidence, felt the weight of both anticipation and responsibility pressing gently against her shoulders. Leo was already settled in a nearby childcare facility, one Julian had arranged discreetly, understanding without needing explanation that her life could not pause for opportunity. As she walked into the sleek boardroom, she caught sight of the men and women already seated around the table, their eyes assessing her with the cool, measured curiosity reserved for someone whose presence was unexpected. Papers rustled, laptops pinged with notifications, and the faint scent of strong coffee mingled with the lingering aroma of polished wood. Arya carried herself carefully, her steps deliberate, aware that she was stepping into a world where precision mattered as much as presence. Julian Hartwell rose from his chair at the head of the table, his gaze immediately finding hers. There was no flourish, no overt display of admiration, only a subtle nod, the kind that conveyed trust and expectation in equal measure. He introduced her as someone who could navigate linguistic nuances across several languages, a rare talent who would be assisting the team in deciphering complex regulatory documents. The room quieted as she opened her briefcase, revealing a series of neatly organized notes and translations. When the first set of documents were projected onto the screen, an error in the Hungarian text became immediately apparent to her, something that had slipped past even the most experienced analysts. With a calm voice, she outlined the mistake, explaining the precise correction and its implications for the proposed biotech partnership. Eyes widened around the room as her insight revealed a risk that had gone unnoticed, a potential loss that could have been catastrophic if the deal proceeded without adjustment. Throughout the day, Arya moved seamlessly between languages and regulatory frameworks, her knowledge not only theoretical but applied with practical understanding. She anticipated questions before they were asked, clarified subtleties in German contracts, and navigated Turkish legal terminology with a fluency that left seasoned professionals astonished. Julian watched silently from his seat, offering support without overshadowing her presence. When a contentious point arose regarding the interpretation of a clause in a Swiss contract, he simply handed her a glass of water, a silent gesture of affirmation that spoke volumes. Arya understood the message. Recognition did not always require praise. Sometimes it was conveyed through trust, through allowing someone to navigate the space with authority. The rest of the team gradually adjusted, seeing not a young single mother seated in borrowed attire, but a strategist whose mind was calibrated to understand complexity with a precision that rivaled anyone in the room. Later, Julian invited her to a negotiation scheduled in Zurich, explaining that her expertise would be critical in bridging gaps between international partners. Arya hesitated, calculating the logistics of travel, childcare, and the implications for Leo. But Julian had anticipated her concerns, arranging for a professional caregiver in Zurich, ensuring that her son's routine remained uninterrupted. When she boarded the flight weeks later, she carried both a sense of trepidation and a deep-seated resolve to prove that her capabilities were not confined by geography or circumstance. The Zurich meeting presented challenges unlike anything she had faced in Boston. Daniel Koig, the head of European strategy, questioned her involvement with subtle skepticism, implying that her role as a mother and outsider could hinder her effectiveness. Arya met his gaze calmly, refusing to be undermined by assumptions about her life or priorities. She responded not with anger, but with articulate precision, presenting data, clarifying translations, and demonstrating her indispensable value. Julian observed quietly, knowing that her ability to maintain composure under scrutiny would be as critical as her linguistic expertise. The negotiation extended late into the evening, the room thick with tension and the low hum of air conditioning. Arya navigated complex conversations in multiple languages, her interpretations revealing both compliance and subtle advantages in contract terms that might have been overlooked. She noted the nuances in phrasing that could determine liability, intellectual property rights, and financial obligations. As Daniel Koig attempted to challenge a recommendation, she responded with evidence-backed clarity, asserting the importance of accuracy and foresight in translation. Julian's support remained measured, a reassuring presence rather than an overt shield. After the session, she received an anonymous message on her device, questioning the legitimacy of her access and authority. It was an implicit challenge to her credibility, one that could have rattled anyone else. Instead, Arya reviewed the document calmly, noting the procedural flaws in the message's assumptions. She confronted Koig directly, articulating her value and warning against any undermining of her contributions. Her courage, combined with her precise knowledge, shifted the perception in the room. By the time the Zurich meeting concluded, Arya had not only established herself as a linguistic authority, but also demonstrated that her presence enhanced the team's effectiveness. Julian's quiet support, along with the procedural adjustments he implemented to formalize her role, solidified her legitimacy in the organization. She returned to her temporary residence that evening, reflecting on the journey that had brought her from a lullaby and coach to the center of high-stakes international negotiation. Leo, asleep in the care of a trusted caregiver, was safe and content, allowing her to recognize that personal obligations and professional excellence could coexist if arranged thoughtfully. As she prepared her notes for the final debrief with Julian, she realized that her ability to listen, observe, and apply her skills under pressure had earned respect not through charm or negotiation, but through competence, patience, and unwavering focus. Aria's life had shifted in subtle yet profound ways. The opportunities that Julian had offered were more than professional, they were affirmations of her value in a world that often overlooked talent in favor of appearances. She carried herself with a quiet confidence, understanding that recognition could manifest as small gestures, as the provision of resources, or as trust in her judgment. As she left the building to walk along the cobbled streets of Zurich, the night air crisp against her cheeks, she felt the full weight of possibility. Each step forward affirmed that her sacrifices, her dedication to languages, and her unwavering commitment to her son had prepared her for this moment. Julian's invitation had not merely introduced her to a meeting room. It had introduced her to a vision of what her life could encompass: professional respect, personal support, and the power to shape outcomes with intellect and empathy. The Geneva skyline glittered beneath a pale autumn sun as Aria Bennett stepped off the private transfer, her thoughts a mixture of anticipation and cautious excitement. Julian Hartwell had invited her here not for business alone, but for something that felt profoundly personal, a rare extension of trust beyond the boardroom. The streets were a tapestry of cobblestones and modern glass facades, people moving with a calm efficiency that reflected both European discipline and understated elegance. Aria adjusted Leo's tiny scarf, ensuring his comfort as he clutched her hand, his small face glowing with curiosity. The caregiver Julian had arranged walked a few steps behind them, giving Aria the freedom to engage with the day without worry. Every detail had been thoughtfully managed, and Aria felt a surge of gratitude tempered by a cautious hope that this journey would finally allow her to merge her professional and personal worlds without compromise. Inside the conference room, Daniel Coig awaited a subtle shift in demeanor betraying residual skepticism. Aria faced him directly, recalling the anonymous challenge she had received weeks earlier and the quiet friction that had followed. She spoke with deliberate clarity, reinforcing her expertise, articulating her value, and referencing the pivotal decisions in previous meetings that had prevented costly errors. Her calm confidence illuminated the room, and even Daniel, who prided himself on discernment, could not dismiss the precision and integrity she brought to every task. Julian, seated nearby, offered a quiet but firm nod, signaling that her authority was recognized and protected. The negotiations were intricate, touching on multilingual regulatory frameworks and delicate partnership clauses that demanded exacting attention. Aria navigated each linguistic nuance with an instinct that merged intellect with empathy, understanding not only the words themselves, but the subtle cultural cues embedded within them. As discussions concluded, Aria stepped into a moment of unexpected stillness. Julian invited her onto the balcony, where the view of Lake Geneva stretched in a tranquil expanse, reflecting the late afternoon sun in 1,000 ripples. He spoke softly, his words carrying the same intentional weight he applied in business, but tempered with a personal warmth. "I've seen many people handle complex negotiations," he said, "but I trust someone not just for what they can do on paper, but for their sense of when a word looks correct but sounds wrong. That is the only qualification I truly rely on." Aria felt a swell of emotion at his acknowledgement, recognizing the subtle depth of trust he had extended. It was not a casual compliment. It was validation of years of unseen effort, sacrifices made for her son, and a life carefully balanced between responsibility and ambition. She realized that Julian's support had never been about fanfare or superficial praise. It had been about providing space for her to demonstrate her value and making certain she had the resources to succeed. Leo tugged gently at her sleeve, prompting her to crouch and meet his curious gaze. The warmth in his eyes reminded her of every sleepless night, every lullaby hummed across quiet rooms, every moment of doubt and perseverance. Here, on this balcony overlooking a city that pulsed with quiet sophistication, she understood that she had arrived not escaping, not merely adapting, but stepping fully into a life that embraced both her professional brilliance and her role as a mother. Julian handed her a cup of warm tea, a small gesture laden with meaning, acknowledgement without words, support without demand. She sipped aloe, the crisp air, reflecting on the improbable journey from a lullaby on a crowded flight to international boardrooms and personal trust in Geneva. Every challenge she had faced, every subtle moment of skepticism or doubt, had honed her resilience, and now it coalesced into a profound understanding that her voice, her singular, observant, meticulous voice could shape outcomes far beyond what she had ever imagined. The day drew to a close, the sun dipping behind distant mountains and casting golden light across the lake. Arya felt a quiet exhilaration, a deep satisfaction that her skills, intuition, and integrity were not only recognized but actively valued. Julian extended an invitation to continue building something together, not merely in business, but in life, an opportunity to explore partnership on every level, blending personal connection with professional respect. She accepted, aware that this was not a surrender but a deliberate choice to embrace a life that honored her capabilities, her sacrifices, and her aspirations. Standing on the balcony, Leo nestled safely beside her. She realized that the journey from a soft lullaby to a world stage had revealed something far greater than opportunity. The profound impact of recognition, the transformative power of trust, and the way a single voice, carefully attuned and respected, could indeed change the course of many lives. Arya and Julian lingered in the golden light, a quiet promise extending between them. She reflected on the lessons learned: patience, observation, courage, and the willingness to step into spaces that demand precision and heart. The city hummed softly below, and she felt, for the first time in years, that she had not merely survived the challenges of life, but had arrived present, capable, and ready to shape the future with intention. Here, she was not just a mother, not just a linguist, but a force of clarity and understanding, entrusted with a unique power that others had overlooked for too long. As the evening shadows deepened, she breathed in the crisp air, feeling fully alive, fully seen, and fully empowered to continue the journey she had begun so many years ago, guided by her voice, her mind, and the quiet but unwavering trust of someone who had recognized her true worth. Moral lesson: sometimes life recognizes talent in the quietest moments, a song, a correction, a gentle insistence on accuracy. True opportunity comes when someone sees your skill and trusts it without expectation or fanfare. Arya's journey shows that courage, patience, and careful attention to detail create ripples far beyond the immediate. Sacrifice and responsibility need not limit ambition, they can strengthen it. Trust, both given and earned, transforms potential into reality. Every voice matters, and every choice to act with integrity and insight can shape a future that blends personal fulfillment with professional achievement. Step forward, quietly, confidently, and embrace your value.